Coming up next on the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
My personal Hendrickson that I'm pretty comfortable with is nothing like a conventional Catskill. You don't see as many people fishing the traditional Catskill flies. I think the biggest development in my trout fly tying life was the advent of CDC, and for dry flies, and fish are just suckers for CDC used properly.
That was John Shaner describing the differences between present-day dries versus Catskills dries. Theodore Gordon, Joe Fox, Eastern Hatches, and the birthplace of fly fishing today on The Swing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Hey, how you doing today? Thanks for stopping by the show. Share. If you get a chance, it would be great if you can share a past episode or this episode if you have found some value in it. If you know somebody that would love a little history, a little knowledge, drop on an episode. This is how we've been growing this podcast since day one. Share it out if you get a chance. We appreciate the support. Before we get started, let's hear from our sponsor. Waters West Fly Fishing Outfitters is your go-to resource for swung fly techniques, two-handed casting, and anadromous fish. Find out why Waters West has built a cult-like following around their fly tying materials and why they are the go-to resource for the OP and beyond. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/waterswest right now to check in with Ed and Kyle and get all geared up to get on the water. Today's episode is sponsored by Daiichi Fishing Hooks, a leader in the fly fishing industry and still the world's sharpest hook. Tempered with carbon-rich steel, Daiichi offers superior penetration without compromising the hook's structural integrity. You can head over right now to wetflyswing.com/Daiichi and check out what they have going and check out these killer hooks. That's Daiichi, Daiichi. John Shaner takes us into the Catskills area and describes the flies, the people, and the history of these famous waters. We find out more about Theodore Gordon. We discover how the Catskills are different than the chalk streams. And then we dig into some of the famous hatches of the East. And we just get the full scoop on the people, the places, what makes this all unique and so historic. This is a good one. The Joe Fox family story and connection also today on the podcast. Here we go. John Shaner. How you doing, John?
Good. It's a rainy day here in the Catskills, Dave.
Yep. There you go. We have a lot in common because I'm on the other side of the country in Oregon, and it's a rainy day here as well. So, I guess you guys get some cold weather too. Do you love the rain or do you kind of hate the rain?
Well, I lived in Corvallis briefly in the early 90s.
Okay.
So I know all about rain, both from upstate New York and the far west. So
that's right. What were you doing in Corvallis?
Following a significant other. She was a professor at OSU, and so long time ago.
Yeah, that's usually the way it works. Cool. Well, we're going to stay in on the New York side today and talk about the Catskills. This is a topic that has come up a lot. It's an interest of mine because it's one of those historic, the Catskill style flies, all this stuff. So I want to talk a little about history because you're basically an expert in this topic and go there. But before we get there, take us back into fly fishing really quick. How did you first get into fly fishing? Then we'll jump in the Catskills.
I almost can't remember when I didn't fish, and somewhere there's a picture of me fishing in a bucket when I was about 4. I grew up in the Finger Lakes region of New York, and I had big trout literally in my front yard. And as soon as I had wheels under me, I was down here in the Catskills about an hour and a half away. And, fly fishing, I don't know how I picked it up, but it's been in my blood since I was a kid.
It has. There you go. So since day one, just on the Catskills, why is it such a known? Is it just because it's been there, everybody's fishing it for so many years, or why is it the place that's known? Why it seems like it's one of the biggest names in fly fishing?
Well, it's interesting, and a big part of it is proximity to population, and certainly the East Coast cities early on, very early on in our history. But what's also interesting is that it was not the destination it was until some of the other regions had become famous, the Main Lakes and the Adirondacks and parts of Pennsylvania, the Poconos. Part of that was the Catskills are just the topography is just so rugged. They were hard to get into. And there was no reason for people to be here. It didn't have the forest industries that Maine had, and it didn't have the lakes and so forth that the Adirondacks had. So it was a little late getting started. And as much as I'm Catskill centric, this is not truly the birthplace of fly fishing in the United States. Now, they'll probably be outside my house with with torches tonight, but I think anybody that knows their history will find that's true. The other part of it is that in the Catskills, there's an awful lot of club water, private water, and clubs like the Brooklyn Fly Fishers and the Fontanellas Club and so forth go way, way back. And these were all New York City and Boston and Philadelphia moneyed people. And also the proximity to New York City with a lot of writers and so forth. And once travel into the Catskills became easier and more comfortable, they could pop up here on a weekend, stay at their favorite club or hotel or whatever, and then go back to the city and write about it during the week. And I think that's where they became, by the early 20th century, kind of became the focus of fly fishing in America.
The place, fly fishing and writing, right? That's probably part of it. There's been probably more written about that area. And then before we jump into the Catskills a little more, so what is the birthplace of fly fishing in the U.S.?
I think it was happening in a lot of places at a lot of times. You look at, for instance, Philadelphia had, I can't give you dates, but there were shops in Philadelphia selling flies and fly fishing equipment pre-revolutionary times. And they were probably fishing the limestone streams around Carlisle and certainly up in the Poconos before, Lancaster. And at one time when I worked for Hardy, our offices were in Lancaster, and Lancaster was the largest inland city in the country. And, around Lancaster, certainly it's quite built up now, but around Lancaster, there were dozens of little limestone streams, and they were known for their brook trout. So, you probably had people fishing there, fly fishing there long before they were in the Catskills.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's just start with the flies really quick, because I always love to go back there. I'm not sure if you're a big fly tire, but the Catskill style dries, right? That seems like that's the one thing you hear a lot about, but there's other flies. Talk about that. What were some of the earliest flies out there?
That's a really great topic. And in my connection with the Catskill Fly Fishing Center and Museum, we recently, a group of us went through the fly collections and looked at literally thousands of flies. And we were given a real bird's eye view of the trajectory of fly development in the Catskills from, very hands-on perspective. It's often said that Theodore Gordon kind of brought the dry fly to America. And he is kind of the patron saint, and he makes a very good story. And he certainly did have an awful lot to do with that story. But, if you go back a little farther, there's certainly a lot of other writers that were, were fly fishing and, popularizing it up in here. But what Gordon did, and it's, he had the time to fish a lot, and he was a very curious person. He got his hands on a copy of Frederick Halford's book on dry fly fishing, and corresponded directly with Halford. Halford sent him a selection of flies, which, by the way, are still extant, and they're in the Anglers Club of New York collection. They were very different than what was needed on the Catskills waters. And not that they wouldn't work, but Gordon found that a sparser fly with a stiffer hackle worked a lot better. One of the things about Catskill rivers, and certainly compared to something like the chalk streams in England where dry fly fishing was codified, is that on any given day or even on any given hour, a Catskill angler may encounter everything from from pocket water to riffles to flat water to almost anything. And without changing flies, you need a fly that will work fairly well on different types of water. Yeah. And Gordon recognized this. Interesting thing about Gordon, though, he was much more known in England than he was here. And by the time he died in 1915, he was more or less obscure outside of a very small contingent of Catskill regulars. And it was people like Roy Steenrod and Herman Christian, and then a little bit later, Rube Cross, who really kind of continued the tradition of the Catskill dry fly. They continued to modify it. And in fact, their flies look very different than the Gordon flies. But what's very interesting is that the leap from, there's like 3 leaps. There's a leap from Halford to Gordon, and then Gordon to Christian Steenrod. And by the time you get to Christian and Steenrod, it's the final development of the Catskill dry fly. It really hasn't changed much. Now, certainly there's individual styles and density of dressings and patterns and so forth. But looking at the early dry flies, my benchmark for the perfect Catskill dry fly has always been Rube Cross. But you look at Herm Christian and you look at Roy Steenrod flies, and they're every bit as good, if not even a little bit more highly developed. And that is the final product. And those of us that still tie those flies, we're pushing to get that, that style exactly right.
Gotcha. What does more highly developed mean?
By highly developed, I mean they kind of reach the zenith of what one would recognize as a Catskill dry fly. Relatively sparse tie, a thin body, stiff hackle, usually with wood duck wings, and the tails generally of hackle fibers. And the Gordon flies very frequently had either wood duck or mallard tail fibers, which tend to break and don't tend to float as well. But the Catskill flies are really marked by delicacy.
And are we talking dry flies only, or are we also talking other wet flies and things like that?
Well, primarily dry flies, but even the Catskill wet flies have a sparseness to them that you don't see in other regions. I think one thing we have to do is separate regional flies and flies tied by these fly dressers that I've mentioned from commercial flies. Even today, the vast majority of commercial flies are more heavily dressed than flies dressed by a good amateur tyer. And by amateur, I don't mean beginner. I mean non-commercial tyer.
Yeah, gotcha. Wow, this is cool. Definitely, I knew there was going to be a number of topics we could dig into. You mentioned a little bit on the style. So we've got Gordon. Obviously, he was a big name. Where did Theodore Gordon? Maybe we can talk about that. Like, where did he fish? Was there also certain rivers that make it, like, if I was going to go fish a dry fly in the Catskills, is there like a river that I could fish that he fished or more popular?
Absolutely. I mean, Gordon's early fishing experiences, I had mentioned the limestone streams in Pennsylvania, and that's where some of his earliest trout fishing experiences were. And he writes about them frequently in his notes and letters. He's primarily associated with the Neversink, but he also fished the Beaverkill. And let me make a point here is that early on, when we talk about Catskill fishing pre-early 20th century, it's mostly in the upper rivers. And by upper rivers, I mean the Beaverkill above its confluence with the Willowemock and the upper part of the Neversink. These are smaller rivers up there, again, primarily private, have been for many, many years, well over a century in most cases, century and a half in some. And he was fishing these smaller rivers. The big rivers, the rivers that most of us think of today, the lower Beaverkill, below Roscoe, did not become popular until the early part of the 20th century. But yes, you can go and you can fish in named pools where Gordon stood. I mean, that is a very possible thing to do.
Gotcha.
And I've done it.
And you've done it. And you could do that because you could just pick up some of his writings and figure that out?
Well, yes, exactly. And what's interesting about, as I said about Gordon, he was much more known in England than he was in the United States. John McDonald in the late 1940s collected his notes and letters. Now, a lot of Gordon's personal correspondence was burned when he died. He was had tuberculosis, and the family burned a lot of his belongings.
What'd they do that for? Oh, just to get rid of it, just to kind of...
Yeah, they were afraid of contagion.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. And, who knows what other reasons. But what's interesting is his correspondence with Skues.
Oh, yeah.
His letters from Skues were all burned. Now, Skues kept all of the letters that he had received from Gordon. So there's this wonderful correspondence with, two great angling minds. And John McDonald in the late 1940s collected what he was able to find into a book called The Notes and Letters of Theodore Gordon, which is it's a fabulous read. You get the sense you'd really like to sit down and have an afternoon talking with this guy. He had an incredible mind, an incredible observer, and one can see why he and Skues would get along.
So Skues, give us a little primer on who was he? I mean, I know he's a big name out there.
Yeah, Skues is a big name out there, and I'm a big George Edward MacKenzie Skues fan. Skues was probably the greatest angling mind of the 20th century. He's a guy that you wished he could have lived 3 lifetimes because of, the things he was doing. He, on the chalk streams in England, which I've been very fortunate to have fished a number of times, it really puts it into perspective to see what he was doing. Halford is was actually a friend of his early on, and put him up for membership in the Fly Fishers Club of London. So they knew each other quite well. What Skues did was try to figure out, how to catch trout when they appeared to be rising, but they wouldn't take dry flies. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And he started to look beneath the surface.
Right. So Skues was the first person that really noted that started going deeper.
Not the first one that noted it, but the first one that really starts to develop and write about it. They were doing similar things in the northern part of England, probably a century before that, but with the spider style flies and so on. But Skues brings it down to the chalk streams, and starts to fish, starts to break the surface. Now, interesting thing about Skues is that when we think of nymph fishing, we think of primarily fishing deep.
Yeah,
he was fishing very high in the water column, and if you read any of Skues, you'll a lot of the indications of a take are visual indications.
Oh, right. So more like an emerger.
Exactly. Yeah. Although he doesn't use the word. He's fishing nymphs that are just getting ready to emerge and looking for a visual signal of a take.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. The other thing about Skues, people forget this, is that he was just as apt to use a dry fly as he was a nymph, and his books are full of dry fly patterns. So when the fish were, obviously taking, duns or sedges, we'd call them caddis, spinners, he would certainly go with what, was probably the best choice in terms of fly.
Yeah, perfect. What is, you fish the chalk streams of England. Compare that to, say, the Catskills. Is there any similarities?
Yeah. The English chalk streams are going to be a lot closer to the Paradise Valley spring creeks or some of the other spring creeks out west. A lot of it is fishing from the bank, almost the majority of it, and almost all of it is to sighted fish. They're very low gradient, even flow rivers with a tremendous amount of weed growth. The Catskill rivers are we're in the mountains here. We're much higher gradient. As I said before, pool and riffle, a day's fishing could see everything from almost Spring Creek-like conditions, through tumbling pocket water. So we have a lot of different types of water here. And, comparing the Catskill rivers to the chalk streams is
not a good comparison.
It's a far stretch.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So that's good. All right. And obviously we talked about Theodore Gordon, Skues. I mean, there's lots of big names that some of us have heard about, right? Who currently, is out there? I mean, you're actually, obviously you've made a good name for yourself. And I know, Dette Flies, for example, is one of our sponsors on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They've obviously got a lot of history. Who would you say are the people that really in the Catskills are still alive, that are still out there, that are kind of big?
Oh my gosh. Ed Van Putt is kind of the grand old man today. Oh my gosh. Joan Wulff.
Oh, Joan Wulff, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to say because, we've lost a lot of people like, quite recently, like Art Lee and some of the others. People of my generation, and I'm, not that old, but not that young, we still remember the Darbees and the Dettes and, a lot of these others.
What was the because we haven't actually heard that story yet fully from, but what is the quick snippet on the Dettes? What's the connection?
Oh my gosh. Nicest people in the world. My gosh. I was going into their shop, like I said, as soon as I could drive, I was down in the Catskills, and, you would go into the, the Darbees or the Dettes or Beaverkill angler, especially this time of year, early in the spring. And it was electric in these shops. I mean, the buzz was incredible. There would be old timers and young guys and everybody, experts and beginners and everybody in between. The smell of mothballs.
Right. Yeah. Mothballs was because I grew up in a little shop too. Mothballs was the thing. Why, is that the only thing people? Because there's other stuff that works, right? The same feathers.
Yeah. I mean, I hope it preserved some of these people because paradichlorobenzene is probably not the best thing to inhale.
No.
But these were little shops. Everyone was different. Everyone had its own flavor.
Right.
And
its own people.
Its own people. And it was, I've spent an awful lot of my life in fly shops, either behind the counter or in front of the counter. And, you just don't find this anymore.
What is it that you don't? Because I know, lots of fly shops are amazing, right? You go around, they've got all this amazing, beautiful equipment and all this stuff. What is the difference between like that nowadays and versus you go back to the time you were talking about in the fly shop?
Well, I was in Ireland last year, and I was in Clonanov fly fishing. And it's a beautiful, beautiful modern shop. You could plunk it down in Montana or Idaho or anywhere else, and they're going to have the same stuff.
Right. Yeah. They got Sims and they got the right.
They got all the right stuff. They got great flies, and the flies are from the same manufacturers. And this is nothing,
it's not a knock. It's just,
it's not a knock at any fly shop.
No.
But, back then, I mean, almost every fly shop was known for something different. Somebody had better leaders, or somebody did a floatant or a tool, or, and then the difference between the flies, the flies that were sold in the Dette shop were very different than the flies that were, that the Darby sold. And when I say sold, towards the last number of years of these shops' lives, they had a lot of different tires tying for them to keep up with demand. Now they weren't marketing the flies as their own flies, and the bins would say tied by Eric Leiser or tied by Delmaze or whatever. They were very honest about that. But unless you bought flies that were, tied by Walt or Winnie or Mary or Harry or Elsie, they could have been tied by a number of other people. I knew that back then, so I was a little careful. And look, when those shops were going, I had very little money. I was, I was kind of a dirtbag fly fisherman.
How much were flies back then? Do you remember?
Oh my God, they were $1 a piece. And in Harry's book that came out in 1977,
Harry, who's that?
Harry Darby.
Okay.
Yeah. He asked the question, who the hell is going to pay $1 for a fly?
That's right.
So, a documented Harry Darby fly right now will get you 100 times $1.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So that's amazing. And what was Harry Darby known for?
Harry was, he was a raconteur of, rare, whatever. He was
materials or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a great storyteller. I mean, you'd go in there and you'd feel like you'd known the guy forever. Elsie was a little more business, but Harry loved to tell stories, and he had a story for everything. And if you were there, any more than a few minutes, probably the bottle of scotch would come out.
Of course.
And things you can't do today. And I feel very fortunate to have caught kind of the tail end of that culture. The Dette shop went much longer. And in fact, Joe Fox is still maintaining a wonderful tradition. And I'll have to say Joe's a good friend of mine, and I think the world of Joe.
How is Joe Fox related to the Dette? How did that come to be?
Joe's mom is there was Walt and Winnie, and their daughter was Mary. Mary is Joe's grandmother. So Joe grew up in it.
Yeah, Mary is Joe's grandmother. So
yeah.
So Walt is Joe's
great grandfather.
Yeah, great grandfather.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So he's totally he's connected. Yeah. So it's just a different name because he's on the mom's side.
He's family. Yeah, he's family, and he grew up in it. And I have to say, Joe is one of the finest fly dressers I've ever seen.
Yeah, I've been talking to Kelly and trying to get Joe, and eventually we'll get him on, but he's just hasn't happened yet. So it's good to have you on because you're actually, you know what I mean. You're doing a lot of the storytelling, which is cool. You're almost right.
Yeah. Joe's shop in a lot of ways is and this is again not a knock against other good shops in the area, but Joe's is the closest. Dette Flies is the closest to the original Catskill shops.
That's it. See, that's what's cool about it. So that's what you. So Dette Flies, I mean, not only has been around, I think they're celebrating their 95th year or something like this year.
Yeah.
So not only have they been around for almost 100 years, but they still have the tradition. So you walk in there, and it's not like you're walking into the Orvis Fly Shop or whatever. They still
It's not. In the way he chooses his products. I was in fly fishing retail for most of my career, and to go in a shop like his and see how he chooses what he carries, is kind of wonderful for an old guy like me that, remembers the old fashioned shops. And, he's got great, I don't want to make this sound like a commercial for Dette Flies, but he's got great folks working in there, and it's a good vibe. It really is. Yeah. It's a good vibe.
No, I love it. I think I'm trying to think of one of the brand, I can't remember the name, but there was somebody that makes like custom, gear essentially. Yeah. And he made a Dette Flies, like I think it was a vest or something like that. Right. But it was just a custom thing. And it was like, you could probably only get it a couple of places. Right. And so it sounds like that's something that they're into is all that stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, just the fact that he sells things like Stetson hats.
Oh, Stetson hats. Right.
I just love that,
Does he sell what about the old English style, those caps that I can't remember what those are called.
No, I can't, I
the typical like English, right? Fly fishing.
I'm the only guy I know that wears a proper flat cap. I just, that's my Anglophile.
Oh, you wear now. What is the flat cap? Is that what it is?
That's what you're thinking of.
Yeah, and you wear one of those?
That's my usual fishing.
Oh, amazing!
Cap.
There you go. So you got it. You got that. That's cool.
I love fishing in England, and so I've worn a flat cap for many, many years.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, and obviously, the caps are. I'm sure they're made out of wool and they're super warm. Right?
Oh, they're tweed and. They just don't blow off.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Cool.
They don't blow off, and they're good head protection.
Drifthook has pre-packed fly assortments for every stage of your fly fishing journey. Their professionally curated fly fishing kits are crafted so you can catch more on your next outing. Each kit is organized by species and includes instructional videos and easy-to-follow guides. I've got the nymph box right here in my pack, and I've been loving this. They've got everything from the tiny zebra midges with a little flash or all the way up to their large go-to guide flies. This box has you covered for all conditions. And were you thinking Euro nymphs? They got that covered as well. Beautiful Euro nymph flies, all the key flies you need to get going, whether you're a brand new to it or a veteran. Drifthook has the flies for you. Along with their nymph boxes, they have dry flies, streamers, and all the education to go along with all these as well. These are fly shop quality flies, hand-tied and inspected before being carefully packed neatly into these boxes. And Matt personally packs and prepares these boxes like he was tucking the kids in for bed at night. cozy, comfortable, and just the right amount of love. Whether you're an experienced angler who needs to stock up on some flies or get a great gift for the family, Drifthook has you covered. Check them out right now. That's Drifthook, wetflyswing.com/Drifthook, and use swing at checkout to get 15% off your next order. You support this podcast and small business by checking out Drifthook right now.
Well, give us a rundown. So we got the Catskills, and you've mentioned a few rivers. What are the, if somebody was planning a trip and they want to go up there and stop by Dette's and all this stuff and just kind of check it out, like what are the places they have to fish?
Well, let's kind of go east to west. You've got the northern Catskills and rivers like the Esopus that is almost a different world. Now, I've fished the Esopus. I haven't for many years, but that's up in the northern Catskills around Hunter, in the kind of the resort area of the Catskills. Very good fishing. You've got that and the Schoharie, which us southern Catskillers don't get up to very often. We talk about it and we say, we really should get up there because it is very good fishing. And in fact, in the fall, the Esopus has a wonderful run of fish up out of the reservoir that, some of these fish can get quite large. And that has a little bit of its own culture. And then the Catskills, the southern Catskills really start with the Neversink. A lot of it is underwater now, a lot of the famous water that Gordon would have fished.
And that's because they've just built dams
and so forth. And then you get to, the Sullivan County Catskills, which is the Beaverkill Willowemoc. And you've got, so much fishing there. And these are the real famous rivers. The wonderful thing about the Catskills, it's some of the Catskills, at least the Beaverkill Willowemoc, is how much access there is. Now, there's an awful lot of private water, too. And most of the upper rivers are private and, held by clubs and patrolled and so forth. And you can stay, for instance, at the Beaverkill Valley Inn and fish their water, which is an incredible experience. I mean, it's just very, very, very fine fishing. And it's a little spendy, but if someone has a non-fishing partner and wanted a wonderful couple of days, certainly the BVI would be a focus. But you've got miles and miles and miles of fishing on the Willowemoc, which you'll hear me say I love all these rivers because I do love all these rivers. And each one has a distinct flavor to it. The Willowemoc is some of the finest small to medium size fishing you'll find in the water you'll find in the east. And by the time you get to Roscoe, now you're onto the what I call the big Beaverkill, the lower Beaverkill. And there's about 15 river miles of the Beaverkill, most of which is either open water or no kill and public access. It would take several lifetimes to learn all that water. And it's bigger water, it's big pools, but you have your famous pool like Barnhart's and Hendrickson's and Cairns and Wagon Tracks and Mountain and Cemetery and on and on. There's plenty of fishing there. I would say the Beaverkill is, in a classic sense, it's almost the ideal trout river. I mean, just in terms of topography, it's just perfect. And it's so beautiful. Beaverkill flows into the East Branch. The East Branch is a tailwater. Lower East Branch now is a tailwater below Papacton Reservoir. It's the narrowest of the Catskill valleys, and it's a bit smaller than the West Branch, but very, very fine fishing, very low gradient, a lot of flat water, and extremely difficult fish. If you really love getting beaten up by fish, the West Branch or the East Branch is your river. And I spent an awful lot of time on the East Branch, and it's very distinct from the other rivers. That flows into the West Branch at Hancock. Hancock, you've got the lower river, the big river, that has fishing all the way down to Callicoon. And it's a big river. I mean, it's a massive river at that point. But good trout, very good trout fishing. Then up the West Branch, I live on the West Branch at Deposit. It comes out of the Cannonsville Reservoir. And the West Branch today probably gets the most traffic of any of the Catskill rivers. I guess for good reason. We have a lot of fish here, but let me, kind of quantify that. Estimates that I see are between 400 and 700 fish per mile. That's 10% of a Western tailwater, even a mediocre Western tailwater. What we don't have are, we don't have midges and shrimp. We don't have the substrate for weed growth that the Western tailwaters get. So it's more like a freestone tailwater, if you will. And I don't know if that's a way to put it, but what we do get is we do get good summer temperatures. August, the water temperature will be in the low 50s. So we have, and there, this is limestone strata. All of this is limestone strata. So, our rivers are fairly rich. What we don't have is the substrate, that's going to grow as many insects as, say, a Western tailwater will.
Oh, gotcha. So what is the substrate mostly in?
It's mostly hard. It's almost like cobbles and very, through the riffles and so forth, you'll get some weed growth, but not trailing weed. You don't get weed beds. They're fairly even bottoms. Now the Beaverkill and Willowemoc, they're going to have more rounded rocks and so forth. But a lot of what we have is bare rock. So your insects are underneath and so on.
Okay. And so in the Willowemoc, that definitely is a name you hear a lot about. What, it sounds like you fished that one a little bit. What's the, is the summertime? Is that usually the best time if you want to get some action?
That's a great question. It's raining hard here today, but I was expecting to go down and find rising fish, down in town here.
Oh, on the Willowemoc?
On the West Branch. Galen Mercer and Art Lee made a point of catching fish in the Beaverkill every month of the year when they both lived in Roscoe years ago. I've seen fish rising on the Willowemoc, and I've got a picture of Art fishing to rising fish along an ice shelf on the Willowemoc. But the season really starts, it really starts about mid-April. New York has gone to a year-round open season just a couple of years ago. Traditionally April 1st was opening day, and it was a party. For many years, it was a real party. We don't have that anymore, but by the time you get into mid-April, you'll start to see the first, blue quills or paraleps or little betas or whatever, and start to get rising fish. Again, depending on runoff, depending on how much moisture we have. By the 25th of April, you'll see Hendricksons. And Hendricksons on all of these rivers, to me, are the big hatch. And it's almost a shame that they're one of the first because, they're here too quick and over too soon. And the fish love them. They will bring big fish up. And the fish are very hungry at that time of year. There's some bugs that the fish just seem to like better than others. And the Hendrickson is maybe it's just the tastiest bug that they know of, but boy, they love it.
Maybe describe that a little bit, that hatch. How long is it? And then what are those bugs?
Well, you've got the Hendrickson and you've got the which is the female, and you've got the male, which is the red quill. They do vary in color from stream to stream. They're about a size 14. So they're a pretty good size bug. They keep very accommodating hours. The hatches usually don't start anywhere earlier than 11, usually around 1 o'clock or so, and go into the afternoon. And the hatch can, like anywhere else, it can, in terms of duration, depending on the year, depending on various factors, can be short or long. I've seen them trickle off for almost a month. I've seen the hatch over within 2 weeks. In 2012, I think it was 2012, They hatched on the 12th of March. And we had about a week's fishing on the border waters that was incredible before anybody found out about it. I haven't seen that before or since. Usually it's a late April, early May insect. And then the spinner is just as important.
What's the spinner called? So what bug is this? What is is there a site?
It's it's the Ephemerella subvaria.
Oh, yeah. It's a mayfly.
Mayfly, exactly. Upright mayfly. And it's a very pretty one, by the way. It's very symmetrical, if you will, very attractive kind of fly, and really pretty fly. But after that, you get the shad fly, the apple cat, as people call them. And
before we get into that, I want to keep going on the hatches. I want to talk. So the Hendrickson, I love this because I didn't, Hendrickson, the red quill. You got this cool. So, and the fly to match it would be some sort of, right, obviously Catskill style dry, but would also, because that's always the thing you hear, like, okay, so Catskills in other parts of the countries, why are people not using Catskills as much, and like, because people love the Adams parachute, right, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Would that work there as well?
It does. And my personal Hendrickson that I'm pretty comfortable with is nothing like a conventional Catskill. It's you don't see as many people fishing the traditional Catskill flies.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's just like anywhere else. I think the biggest development in my trout fly tying life was the advent of CDC, and for dry flies, and fish are just suckers for CDC used properly. So, most of my dry flies incorporate that. Now, that's just me, And I can tell you that, among my friends, I have buddies that swear by, snowshoe rabbit foot, that swear by, synthetics. I mean, you name it.
Sure. There's all sorts of different ways to do it.
There's all sorts of different ways.
It's just one style, right? Yeah. It's cool because there's the history there. But at the end of the day, there's lots of stuff that will work, right? A lot of people joke about it, right? It's not it's more the casting might be as much presentation as the fly you choose, right? Potentially.
I can tell you right now, people ask me, how do you catch fish in these rivers? And I boil it down to one thing: accuracy.
Yeah.
Everything that I do in terms of rigging my tackle, my approach, even my flies, is all predicated on putting it over the fish properly. Generally these fish see a lot of flies. They see a lot of dragging flies. And they're not going to move too far to something that isn't just right.
What does your setup look like for if you're fishing, let's just take us to the Hendrickson, right? You got this going, this hatches on, you're right in early May. What does your leader setup and all that look like?
I'm going to starting with the rod. I fish almost exclusively 4 weights. I just find that that's about the ideal size here. 5 weights just as good. You'll find more anglers with a 5 weight in their hands, but 8 to 9 foot 4 weight is, I do fish. Actually, I've gone back to fishing a lot of bamboo rods again. I started with bamboo rods, and in the last few years, I spent a lot of time fishing bamboo again. Graphite's a better material. It just is.
Does the 8 or 9 foot depend whether you are fishing small tight quarters versus long?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if I get a opportunity to fish the upper rivers or the Willowee-Mock, I'll probably take a shorter rod. But 9 foot 4 weight graphite rod, that thing's that's a tool. That really works.
That's it. Sensitive and all. That's part of it. Yeah.
I do tend to use very long leaders personally. To me, a short leader is anything less than 15 feet. And one of the things, I'm not an advocate of fishing light tippets just for the sake of fishing light tippets. I believe that, in landing fish as quickly as possible. But in the last few years, I find myself more and more having to go to finer tippets. I don't want to say having to go to, but I think I'm having a little more success going to finer tippets. And, in years past, fish 4X on Hendricksons, and now I'm fishing maybe 5X and probably 6X. And I fish 6X more than anything else. Now, again, dependent on fly size. I don't want to, a big size 12, like you say, a parachute Adams or big rusty spinner or whatever isn't going to work real well on 6X. But I tend to go finer than I used to and not worry so much about, the stuff is so strong today. Unless you pop them off on the strike, you're going to land him.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, we had did an episode with the trout hunter, back to the other side of the country in the Henry's Fork, and they were talking about the one thing I first heard about them was their leaders, the trout hunter leaders, because they have, and he told the story. John told the story about how that was created basically from a connection to Japan and the stuff they were using over there, this really light stuff. And anyways, it was this whole story. But essentially, right, I mean, that is put them on the map a little bit, right? So people know, for the spot. But it sounds like they're also light leaders are very important, good, strong light leaders.
Rich and John are very good friends of
mine.
Oh,
good. Oh, cool. Yeah, you know those guys. So you know that whole story about how they came out with Okay.
Yeah, and their tippet material is great. But let me just throw something else in here that a lot of people might not think about, and that is hook strength. Very few people think about the strength of hooks.
That's right. Well, what people think is now, just like fly rods, you can't get a bad fly rod. I think people are like, well, you know what I mean? They're all super strong hooks.
I'll tell you a funny story. In my very early years down here, we were fishing the East Branch, and the East Branch at that time, if you saw another angler on the river, I'm talking the whole river, it would be something to comment on. We literally had these rivers to ourselves in my early days. And the East Branch was it wasn't like crazy with big fish, but you didn't count anything under 16 inches. And the average dry fly fish we were catching was somewhere between 18 and 20 inches.
And what species are these?
These are brown trout, and this is in flat water. And what we were finding out is that the standard dry fly hooks we were using, and at that time that was a Mustad 94 840, we'd straighten them out on these fish. We would straighten them out on these fish. And in about 1980, we met Alan Bramley, who owned Partridge Hooks of England at that time. And we switched to Partridge hooks because they were much stronger. And, this was a lesson I learned really early on. And I spent a lot of years in Montana in the West as well. And I just hate losing fish to weak hooks. And the idea, maybe I'm, shouldn't say these things, but the idea of trying to save a few cents on a hook, to me is like
crazy.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Fish of a lifetime, potentially, right? Versus.
And, and what really got me thinking about this, not, I had a relatively short and not very well-known guiding career. And you'd see, using a lot of shop flies and, and you'd see these flies, fish would come off, you'd see these flies and the hook would be bent out, you'd bend the hook back, it gets you thinking, I mean, how soft is this hook that I can bend it back 3 or 4 times? If I get a hook that's like that, I will simply not buy that hook again. And consequently, I tie an awful lot of my dry flies on relatively heavy hooks.
You do. And what's your hook? What would be your hook you're using now for a dry fly?
I still like Tiemco's. I like that curved one. I can't think of it right now.
I'm not going to be able much help.
But that's a good one. I've had good luck with that. I hate to say it, I still use a lot of old Partridge hooks that I rat-holed over the years. I mean,
sure.
And then when nobody wanted them, I bought them up for nothing. And so I still tie a lot on those. But I've tried some other hooks that are pretty good. But I tend to even occasionally tie some dry flies on wet fly hooks just for the strength. Because, you're looking at 6X that's testing close to 4 pounds on a dead pull. And you got a hook that straightens with 12 ounces, I mean, come on, right. Something's going to let loose and it's either probably going to be a knot or that hook. And which leads me to another interesting thing about the Catskills is we can have some big fish here. We have a lot of wild fish. In fact, the West Branch is all natural recruitment. And has been for many, many years. There was some supplemental stocking in the East Branch that's been discontinued. Beaverkill and Willowweemock were stocked up until a couple of years ago. But I had a very good friend who lived in Bozeman, unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. And he would come out every year for the Hendricksons. And this is a pretty accomplished angler. He would generally catch his largest fish of the year here in the Catskills when he was fishing with us. Now, I'm not talking, 6-7 pounders, although, they happen. And, they happen not only on streamers and nymphs, but I know, people who have caught 7 and 8 pound brown trout on dry flies. But a 4-pounder is not unusual. And, once you get into that, range above 3 pounds, brown trout's a whole different animal.
How does it change when you get above 3 pounds?
With the type of tackle we're mostly using, you've got some, you've got to have a little bit of skill on your side. You can get fish that will hit backing. And, in the bigger rivers with the amount of room they have, they're not afraid to go places. And, I think a lot of people, when they hook a fish like that, are kind of unprepared for it. The strength of these fish is incredible. I'll put the strength of our fish up against any of the Western fish. They're coming out of cold water and they're wild fish. These are tough fish in a lot of ways. And we do have what's very interesting is we do have a natural population of rainbows. The legend is they were thrown in the main river in the 1800s off a train. So we have this wonderful population of rainbows in the lower river and the lower east and west branch.
Are they in the Willowweemock?
They will come up there, believe it or not. These rivers are all connected, and these fish will move around. The Willowweemock is not really known as a rainbow river, but boy, you get one of these East Branch rainbows, and man, these things just will smoke you. I mean, they are amazing fish.
Today's episode is sponsored by Country Financial. The fires in the Northwest and throughout the West in the last few years have been devastating for thousands of people. Some folks have lost their homes, their belongings, and their sense of safety has all been challenged. This is why insurance and protecting your assets are so critical. Dalton at Country Financial is here, and he was on the front lines during the fires, handing out checks to Country Financial community members, providing drinks, food, and more. And each time Dalton meets up with a client, he does an extensive review of their current assets and coverage. This is his opportunity to really decide and let you know what you need to make educated decisions for your insurance needs. This is a super critical piece, and Dalton, Roy loves it. He loves getting out in the rural community, connecting with people, loves the outdoors, fishing, hunting, everything that goes with it. And so I'm excited to be sharing Country Financial and Dalton with you. The unexpected will happen, so it's always best to make sure your assets and life are protected. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/country right now to get started. That's COUNTRY. Check out Dalton and support this podcast and a great local company right now.
What is you're just taking it back to the thinking about the Hendrickson. So, and this could be just in any dry flies in general. So if you're out there, when do you know, like when you're on the water, it's late April, how do you know the Hendricksons? I mean, is it obvious, or is that something where you need to be calling, the fly shop and getting a report?
It certainly doesn't hurt to call the fly shops, and the Dette's for many years had a wonderful 800 number you called in, and and it was just kind of a neat thing. They'd update it every morning, but water conditions, water levels have a lot to do with that. If it's too much water, too cold, that's going to put it off. But I mean, stay on top of things. I mean, Art Lee used to say that you could kind of feel a hatch coming, and you almost can. I think that's just experience, knowing the type of conditions that you've experienced before. But there's a couple of indicators that sound kind of crazy, but really, really, really are accurate. And that is when there's two of them, and I love both of them. One is when the shad bush, the forsythia, is in bloom. And in the Catskills, they call it shad bush because traditionally that's when the shad would migrate. Or the old timers would tell me when the leaf on the elder bush is as big as a squirrel's ear, you're going to get Hendricksons. And both of those are almost infallible.
Oh, really? Well, yeah. Now, what were those two again?
When the shad bush is in bloom, the forsythia blooms, or when the bud on the alder tree is as big as a squirrel's ear.
Wow. The bud on an alder tree is as big as a squirrel's ear. That's pretty awesome. Okay. So we got two nice natural cues.
Yeah. And, I got to tell you, when I'm seeing forsythia, I'm looking at the rivers, and, as these hatches flow from south to north, they start in Pennsylvania in late March, early April, you will see these same indicators. And years ago when we used to literally chase the hatch from Pennsylvania all the way up into the Adirondacks week by week to try to get on it.
So the Hendrickson, like you said, is the one it's short, but it's short and sweet. You love this hatch.
Love the Hendrickson. I think today probably most of the fishing is done to the sulfurs, and on the tailwaters, the sulfurs, very long duration, and you start seeing them in May, and I believe some of them. I'm not a real bug guy. I'm more of a guy that gets out there and does what needs to be done.
Is there a bug guy in your entomologist or whatever in your neck of the woods? Somebody that is out there?
Lots of them. I mean, it's funny that years ago when I was younger, you walked around with your copy of hatches or matching the hatch or whatever, and everybody spoke Latin. I don't see that much anymore, and I've kind of forgotten most of my Latin binomials, but I think part of that is just me saying things like, they're, little gray ones, size 18 or whatever. But I think that if you do know your insects, it can be helpful. But if you fish any rivers a lot, you kind of get into a groove, and after a while, you know what's going to happen, and you know what you need to do to get it done. But I always used to joke there were, three kinds of fishermen. There were tackle guys, there were bug guys, and there were guys that fished.
Yeah. That's right.
So it's like bird hunters. There's gun guys, there's bird guys, and there's dog guys.
Yeah, that's right. That's totally true. Cool. So, and the sulfur is kind of another mayfly. It's a little bit lighter yellowish in color.
It encompasses several different species that we just call sulfurs, and the fish really like them. The thing about Hendricksons, I usually have about 2 or 3 patterns for the Hendricksons. I have boxes full of different sulfurs, and I'm constantly working on different ones. I just have never, and most of my other friends will say the same thing. I've just never found, every time you think you've nailed it, every time you think you've got you got it figured out, 2 weeks later, they won't eat the damn thing, and you got to try something else.
Yeah, try it out. Gosh. And how long does this sulfur last?
Sulfurs on the West Branch lasted right into September last year.
Oh, wow. And is that the same for Willow Weemock or anything?
Not necessarily. No, they're going to be shorter duration over there on the freestones. Because those are, maybe make the distinction that the Beaverkill and Willow Weemock are freestones. Also, what I didn't mention before and missed, and I'm glad I remembered it, is that above the reservoirs, the East and the West Branch and the Neversink and so forth, above the reservoirs, actually have some very good fishing that nobody takes advantage of. And if anybody likes to explore, and some absolutely beautiful country, way off the beaten path, are the upper sections of these rivers above the reservoirs. This is classic, Catskill fishing. There is plenty of access. You might have to poke around and find it, but it's all online. You can, just go to the, websites and find it. But there's some wonderful, wonderful fishing for people who like to explore and like to get away from things. I have friends that come from Philadelphia every year they fish the upper West Branch and they wouldn't go anywhere else, and they catch great fish.
Yeah. Right. You get your little spot. Most people that are coming in and fishing there is, what are they doing? Where are they staying? Or is there camping out there? What's that look like?
It's interesting. Not many Catskill fishermen actually live in the Catskills. Everybody's from somewhere else, and you'll see license plates. I don't know how many states you could count. Almost every state.
Sure. Everybody's coming, so everybody knows about. They want to get. This is a destination.
Everybody's coming, and a lot. A lot of people will day trip it from New York or whatever, and New Jersey. Certainly on the West Branch, you see more Pennsylvania and New Jersey plates than you do New York plates. But accommodations, my suggestion to anybody wanting to fish these rivers, get your accommodations early. My sister actually has a little cottage that she rents. She's rented this year from the 1st of April to the middle of September, and she doesn't advertise. That just gives you an indication of the problem is there's not much else to do in the Catskills besides fish. So there's not a hell of a lot of accommodations here.
Right. What about hunting? Is there some bird hunting out there?
There is some good bird hunting. There's an awful lot of state land. A lot of the Catskills are in the Catskill Preserve. So there's if you're a bird hunter, and I was in my younger days, there's still some pretty good bird hunting, up in some of the mountains. There's turkey hunting, of course, and deer hunting. And we have a bear get in the garbage every now and then.
Right. That's cool. And there is some camping, but you maybe have to reserve it ahead of time.
There's quite a bit of camping, private and public. Have to do a little research on that. I would say that, the majority are day trippers. I have friends from South Central Pennsylvania who've been coming up for close to 30 years, and they're having harder times finding accommodations than they used to. COVID changed everything.
Are there any lodges out there?
There are, and everything from, like I said, the Beaverkill Valley Inn, which is exquisite. And there's another, I'm trying to remember the one on the Willowweemock, which is, just superb. And they both have private water, but not really any lodges per se, like in the West. It's going to be mostly, highway side motels. In town here in Deposit, there's 2 small motels and they keep pretty busy. But there is, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You've got West Branch Angler at Hale Eddy and Dreamcatcher Lodge. And the reason I forget those is I shouldn't have forgotten those. Dreamcatcher is relatively new and they have cabins and so forth, as does West Branch. And they're both full service with guides and shops and so on.
Nice. So got it. Yeah, I got it all. As we start to kind of get, take it out of here a little bit, you mentioned a few books, but what are the, must-have books, resources that somebody should have on their shelf for like Catskills?
Oh, historically, the Theodore Gordon book, Notes and Letters of Theodore, I think was called The Complete Fly Fisherman.
That's what it was. Yeah, Complete Fly Fisherman.
Yeah. Sparse Gray Hackle's Fishless Days, Angling Nights really captures the earlier Catskills, and it's a book that I grew up on. Art Flick Streamside Guide is as relevant today as it ever has been. Still a great book, still in print. Harry Darby's book about Catskill fly tire is Harry Darby's book. Is still a wonderful read. The Dette's book, I can't remember the name.
Okay, yeah, Dette's book.
Yeah,
okay.
they did one about 30 years ago.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll get some links in the show notes out.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't. I've only got a couple thousand books in my library.
That's right. What does your library look like? If we come into, is this where you do your tying and everything in the one room?
Tying is upstairs. Library is when we bought the house. My significant other, my partner, she collected pink Cadillacs, pink 1957s.
Oh, like actual Cadillacs?
Like actual Cadillacs.
Wow.
And so city girl, I move her down to the country.
So you have some Cadillacs around the house?
No, we got rid of the Cadillacs because we needed the garage space for the library and fishing room.
There you go. So that's where it is. So you got the garage space out there?
So I got the garage. Yeah, we shelved off the garage for the fishing books. So if you come into the library, there's a lot of books. But There was actually a great book written by Eric Pepper and Gary LaFontaine about fishing the Beaverkill.
Oh, really?
And I think it's called Fishing the Beaverkill. And it was a paperback done a bunch of years ago. And it's still very, very relevant.
Yeah. I don't know Pepper at all, but LaFontaine has come up a lot about his, obviously Dette Flies and some of his other stuff. He was a super nerdy, awesome, right? The guy who just got into it.
Yeah, Eric became a Westerner like so many Easterners. I tried that at one time. I lived in Montana for a bunch of years and thought I'd live there forever, and then got transferred back east. And wasn't a bad thing, believe me. It's not a bad thing to be a Catskills angler.
How often do you get Westerners coming out, turning into Easterners out there?
I don't know how often it kind of works out the other way, but there's a lot of Easterners that became Westerners and then became Easterners again. The changes in Montana in the almost 40 years I've been going out there are just dramatic. And I have to say this, that probably, although COVID was kind of the joker in the deck, the Catskills have changed less than any area that I've had long experience with.
Does that mean less pressure of people out there?
No, it doesn't. The pressure
is more than it used to be.
The pressure is, and that's true of everywhere. Yeah. For a lot of reasons, as access shrinks and climate changes and more people do it and so on and so forth. But the experience doesn't. I don't know if it's just me, but other friends say the same thing. The experience is still there. It still feels like the Catskills. That's hard to to quantify. I mean, we're getting kind of a little metaphysical there, but Montana doesn't feel the same to me. And it's nothing against the West. I'm not saying that at all. And maybe I've changed more than it has, but I think I've spent enough time out there to at least from my point of view, be able to say that. I still get the same feelings in the Catskills that I did 40 years ago. And the rivers still feel the same. The crowding is an issue. But when I see how, many 100,000 angler days there are in the Madison now, the last numbers I saw were 2017. It was like 230,000 angler days.
230,000. Well, how would that compare to, say, the Willowemoc or some of these other ones?
Well, look, if you drove up the Willowemoc and you saw 30 anglers, that would be a lot. Now that doesn't, on a good day, on a busy day on the West Branch, you can probably find a couple hundred. But I'm still able to find, there's fish everywhere here. And I guess if I could give a first-time angler some advice, don't necessarily go where all the cars are parked. Take a little while and learn. If it looks fishy, it's probably got fish in it. And I always joked about how I always wanted to chain a bunch of cars together and tow them around, and I'd park them, and then I'd go fish somewhere else. Because if you park a car, invariably somebody else, it's like a bear jam in Yellowstone. If there's 3 cars, it's got to be better than the place where there's only 1 car. And if there's 5 cars, we hit the jackpot. Don't necessarily buy into that. There are most of the fish that I catch in these rivers are in places other people don't fish. That doesn't mean they're secret spots or that they're better than anywhere else. It's just, I tend to get away from people and find plenty of fish. And so, think of it that way. Use the skills that you've learned other places and you'll do just fine here. Patience. I will say that, because we don't have the densities of fish here that other rivers have, I do tend to be a fish hunter. Think of the Henry's Fork rather than the Madison. There's a reason those guys named their shop Trout Hunter. It's the same thing here. I'm a fish hunter, and I hunt fish, constantly. And to me, that's very rewarding. And I look for rising fish. And it's because, as I say, we have a lot of water and not a lot of fish compared to other rivers. Now you will get places where the fish are concentrated, obviously, but generally the best approach is a very slow, methodical, eyes open, all your senses geared to finding fish. I can say I find as many fish with my ears as I do with my eyes.
Oh, wow. Well, how would you find one?
Just hearing rises.
So you hear a rise, and then you pinpoint on, and then you kind of sit there and watch it.
Yep, I hear something that a lot of our rises are very subtle, and just a slurp or a little splash or something that's not quite normal in the background can be it, and gives you somewhere to focus.
Is there an easy way to tell a big fish versus a small fish, or is that pretty obvious?
I think it's as obvious as it is anywhere else. And by that, I'm saying that sometimes big fish can be subtle.
Yeah.
You will see the heads and you can often tell, you can tell again by sound, how much water a fish is moving. But one of the very best fish I took last year, if I didn't know better, I would have thought he was an 8-incher. All that was happening is that flies were coming down his lane and disappearing.
He was just, what was he just sipping them? What was he eating?
He was eating sulfurs, and he was in a great little slot. And just as sulfur would get there, it would just kind of disappear. It just wasn't there anymore. And, he just, I won't brag, but he ate the first cast and he was a hell of a fish.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was that cast like? What's your tip on for that fish? How did you?
Yeah, I don't want to give away much, but I will because you sound like a nice man. I think I see one of the biggest mistakes I see made here, especially on the West Branch, is people trying to cast too far. I'm more of a stalker, and I want a short cast. I want a short, accurate cast.
What's long? What would be a long cast?
For me, long is anything over 40 feet. My average cast is going to be somewhere between 25 and 35 feet tops. A lot of anglers don't realize how close you can get to fish in almost any situation if you take your time.
How close can you get a fish on a dry to take?
No exaggeration. I've had fish with my leader butt in the guides.
Wow.
Take flies. Especially in the last few years, our fish have really gotten used to anglers. And I'm seeing them be a lot less wary. And the other thing is I'm seeing them, we have a lot of boats on the water. We have a lot of drift boats.
Oh, you do? Lots of drift boats.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a new thing? Newer thing?
New in the last 30 years and really it's doubled in the last 10. So we have an awful lot of watercraft and, there's advantages and disadvantages to that I float a few times a year, but I don't own a boat.
No, and that doesn't seem like the Catskills. Like we started, right? This is the Catskills episode. Yeah. It doesn't seem like I don't ever think of a drift boat in the same name as a Catskills.
Yeah. The Delaware system, you're going to see lots of boats. You won't see them in the Beaverkill Willowweemock. That's kind of self-policing. I wouldn't want to be the guy that takes a drift boat down through Cairns Pool. I just don't want to be him.
Is it big enough to take a drift boat down?
It's navigable water.
You could. But I can imagine one thing that would be kind of cool too, not to give anybody any ideas, but there's lots of small little one-person watercraft, right?
Yeah.
That would be
cool.
Oh,
yeah. You see lots of that. But, back to the topic there is that 10, 12 years ago, if somebody ran over your fish with a drift boat, you might not see that fish for a long time. They seem to come right back now. They seem to have gotten used to it. Whether that's good or bad, I'll take it if that's the way they want to act. But I'm seeing them become a lot more, used to human presence. So that works to the advantage of an angler who likes to fish close like I do.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I love that.
Yeah, and it is like I say, if I'm going to tell people how to, learn to cast, learn to use long leaders, and learn to get close. And look, that's true of anywhere I've fished. I don't care where it is. East, West, Europe, whatever. That's how I fish. I'm not out there giving a casting demonstration. Now that doesn't mean that one shouldn't be able to cast distance, because if you can cast distance, it's the same principles as casting into a wind uses the same principles in physics as casting distance.
What was your, I guess kind of had one last question for you. You mentioned on the guiding, you had a short guiding career. I'm always curious about that because my guiding career wasn't very long either. What was that like, and why was it short?
It was all in Montana. It was short because it wasn't because I was a bad guide. It's just
you didn't enjoy it.
I have to say I enjoyed a lot of it, and I actually am still in touch with people that I guided 30 years ago. But I like to fish more. And I have to say that guiding, I learned an awful lot about trout fishing. And what I learned about trout fishing from guiding was how simple you can make it, because you have to make it simple for a lot of people, for beginners and so forth. And it kind of blew away some of my preconceived ideas of how hard trout are to catch. Now I'd been fishing a long time up until then. But I also, found that a lot of it was very hard work.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not an easy job.
It's not an easy job. And I kind of get a chuckle when I can't tell you how many friends here, they buy a boat and, a year later they're going to be a guide. And then a year after that, they're not guiding anymore. It's one thing to fish with your friends and so forth. But when it's complete strangers every day, it takes a certain kind of person to do that.
You gotta love it. I think that's what I've been hearing all these years is that, there's some people that are just born for it. It seems like they just have that skill. They love it. It's their thing. And then, then you got everybody else who's kind of like, well, it sounds like fun until you have a day, whatever. But I hear you. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. It's, I think, please take this the right way. But, when I was first getting started, fishing, a guide was a real luxury. It wasn't someone you depended on to help you catch your fish. And you learned by the seat of your pants, and you learned, high water and low water and good days. And, you learn the hatches and so forth. I mean, 30 years ago, I couldn't have found you a guide in the Catskills. Today, everybody I meet is a guide. Now, part of that is people with, they want to come up, they want to maximize their time. And this is true of anywhere. They want to maximize their time. They want to catch fish. That's all it is to them. So they get a guide, and that's their best chance. And the guide's going to show them how to do it. And he's going to show them where the fish are and so forth. What just shocks me is how many guides supply everything, and right down to waders and tackle and everything. I can't imagine anything more tortuous to me than having to fish with somebody else's tackle.
Right. Yeah.
It's like using somebody else's toothbrush.
Right.
It's like, my tackle is set up that it works for me. And, here you're going to,
well, I can see that. Yeah, no. And I can see that being good for somebody who, is brand new, right? They just got to,
yeah, sure.
They've never done it, but if you're
sure.
Yeah.
And that's not who I'm talking about,
No.
But if you're an angler that, and, there's nothing wrong with getting a guide to get, to get a handle on things, and nothing at all wrong with that. It's not what I'm saying. But to me, the allure of fishing in general, and trout fishing in particular, is learning these things yourself and developing these skills. It's like golfing and having the caddy hit all the tee shots. I mean, really.
Right. Yeah. He can pick your clubs, but that's about where you should leave it. Yeah. Good. Awesome, John. Well, this has been good. I think we'll probably follow up with you at a later point to get an update. But good. Because we talked on it, we talked about a couple of quick hatches, but I know we left a lot on the table there. So I appreciate all the time today and shedding light on the Catskills. This has been a lot of fun, and we'll keep in touch and talk to you soon.
Yeah, it's been fairly wide ranging, Dave, and I warned you that at the beginning. So, but it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to talking to you again.
There it is, wetflyswing.com/455. 455. That's where you got to go if you want to get some. This is like after hours party. Check it out and check in there and see what we have going with the blog posts. I'm just going to leave a blank spot really quick here for insert your favorite music. I can't get this out of my head. We had an episode with Greg Labonte from the main Fly guys, and I asked him what music he loved, and he said Queen, no questions. And ever since then, it kind of was like, Queen, okay, everybody knows about Queen, but I haven't been able to get one of the songs out of my head is Find Somebody to Love. So I'm going to insert your own music here, but if you want, again, I don't know why it's one of those songs that's just stuck, but insert your favorite music here, and we'll play it out on the outro here. And then also love to hear from you if you've got a question I can ask our next guest. Check in with me, Dave, at wetflyswing.com. I'd love to hear from you right now. We're going to do for the first time on this, we're going to do a double listener shout out. Dale Cullum. Dale reached out, and we gave him a shout out recently, but also I missed it. He replied back and noted that he was hoping to get a shout out to some of his buddies. All right, here's what Dale says here. He said, just finished the Great Lakes #2 episode this morning. Good stuff. And Dale said, I wouldn't mind the shout out at all. Can you also give a shout out to my fishing crew from back home? This is Salmon RMBC. Fish for Brains. Fish for Brains. We're giving a shout out right now. I fish, a few of them listen as well, and it would be a hoot for them to hear that. There we go. So Fish for Brains. I'm not sure if that's a YouTube channel, if that's just your name, or if you got a website or something going on there, but I do like that. Fish for Brains. That sounds sounds about right, I think. So, and Dale said, have a great day. All right, Dale, there you go, man. Double shout out, I think, in a close proximity. So definitely appreciate you and the Fish for Brains crews for listening to the podcast. I hope those guys or those crew or those people get a chance to check out this episode. All right, if you want to get a shout out, you can do it anytime. Send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, and or check in on social, and just let me know you're listening and what you're enjoying about the show, and I will give you a shout out on this podcast. All right, let's take a look where we're heading next, and then we will bust out of here into the late night here, and let's see what we got going right now. Oh yeah, we got some good stuff. So we're gonna swing right back around with a quick little Ask a Pro episode tomorrow, a little Alaska, and then we're gonna be dropping in as we take it out the week with Craig Richardson, which we've noted before. Craig brings the Euro goodness, and then next week we are going to be jumping in. We got another Great Lakes episode, I believe. It's scheduled to be on, and I think Jeff has sent the new audio. This will be the #2 segment of the Steelhead Step by Step, which I know people were loving #1. So this is the second one in that series, and I hope you enjoy that one. I am always excited to see when Jeff Liskay gets another episode coming out on the Great Lakes Dude podcast. All right, that's where I'm going to leave it right now. We've got some good stuff going this year, this week, this month. And I hope you could definitely connect with me online or on the water. If you can check out the trip, we got it going on right now. I believe there's still some slots open, wetflyswing.com/school. The best chance to find out if that ski to school is open still, if we have any availability. And I hope to catch up with you, maybe, like we said, maybe on the water. But I hope you are having a great evening, great morning, or great afternoon, wherever in the world you are. And I appreciate you for stopping in today and checking out the show.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.